Hello, everyone. Welcome to another book review. How is everyone doing? I hope everyone is had a lovely January and a lovely February or the beginning of February, and definitely looking forward to Pancake Day, which I'm very much looking forward to. I'm thinking of trying to make Japanese fluffy pancakes. So I'm quite nervous, but quite excited to try and cook that for Pancake Day, and of course, it's Valentine's Day as well. So I hope you are excited for them. Today, we're going to be talking about a book that is a little bit different, a little bit out of my comfort zone when it comes to books, and that is a classic book. But it's one of the classic books. When I think of it's weird. When I think of classic books, I think of classic books that everyone just instantly know of, even if you have not read these books. So you probably definitely have heard of it, probably through people constantly talking about it, people like hearing adaptations of it, or even just learning about them at school. But I've never ever heard of this book. I haven't not known I have not known about this book since I saw it in the library, and I thought, oh, okay, I will give it a shot. So this is so obviously you all have heard of the Bronte sisters, haven't you? We have Charlotte Bronte, who is known for written Jane Eyre and another book beginning with V, unfortunately, that I cannot remember. We have Emily Bronte, who is known for Wuthering Heights. It's debatable whether which is more popular, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte or Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Now, Wuthering Heights I have heard about the most, in my humble opinion. It's my mum's favorite. It's my mum's favorite book and favorite film as well. Because there was a film from 1978 adaptation of Wuthering Heights. There was a song written by Kate Bush. I think it was her debut song of Wuthering Heights, just a year after. And then obviously other people did like covers of Kate Bush. People were aware of the story as well of Wuthering Heights. People have reviewed about Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is another popular book that I've heard of. That is my dad's favorite book. So as well as people having their own opinions when it comes to Jane Eyre. So I have heard about the Bronte sisters, and I know there is a third Bronte, but I never knew her name. I didn't even know that she was a writer herself, and even if I did know she was a writer, I did not know what books that she had written. And so when I first saw this, I thought, oh, okay, I will give this book a shot. And this book that I've read is it wasn't her first book, it was her second book, and I think it was her last book as well before she died. And I decided to look into this book a bit more. And it turns out there was only one adaptation of this book, a 1996 show where the same actor who played as Lestrade in BBC Sherlock was in it, and that was it. That's all I could find. And it turns out that her sister, that Charlotte Bronte tried to suppress this book a bit more because she was worried because it was getting heavily criticized. Actually, this book was getting heavily criticized, and Charlotte does not think that this author can handle any kind of criticism. Now, the sister I'm talking about is Anne Bronte. I think she might be the youngest, but not as well known Bronte sister. So I think that's why we don't hear much about this book, because Charlotte Bronte was the one who suppressed it. And so I can understand why Charlotte Bronte did this. So this book was written and published in 1848. So we're talking about around the time when women weren't known to do things, or to be able to do things for their own living. So the Bronte sisters are constantly support each other of their work, they're all novelists, they're all writers, they're all each other's critics, to be able to become best writers to make a living from it. Because I can imagine it's very, very hard to be writers for around that time period. And I definitely got this from this book, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, but I can imagine that it's sort of similar where the female character is the one who tries to make her own living, speaks her own opinions, to trying to show that she's independent despite that it's going against society and things like that. I was definitely getting that from this book. So I can imagine that it's similar aspect on other books from the Bronte sisters, because it's kind of like living their own lives, kind of sort of things that they had to deal with, because they are women and they try to make it out as authors, which is out of ordinary back in that time. So here is the cover. This is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, and I was quite surprised about that I quite enjoyed this book, actually. At the start, it was really hard to get into at the start, but then once like you're getting the feel of the writing style, you're starting to get a bit more comfortable. Particularly when it comes to the language, the language is quite old-timey and proper, of course, because it's 1848. So it took a bit to get into, but once I get into it, I do genuinely love the story, and I very much got into the characters. So the basic synopsis of this is you're following Gilbert, a very stand-up man who is a farmer. He's a hardworking farmer, and he's quite chatty. He loves his family, he loves his friends, and he thinks he's got his life sorted when he realizes he's going to be a farmer and also going to marry a woman named Eliza. But then all of that has changed when he meets a very mysterious woman named Helen Graham, a mysterious tenant in Wildfell Hall, who also has a son named Little Arthur, and also trying to make a living as a painter. And she lived quite well as a painter. And now she introduced herself as a widow to Gilbert and to other people around her. The thing about Helen Graham as well is that she's also very, very introverted. It's something that I think is also quite out of an ordinary back around that time. So she's not a fan of chatting in parties. She's not a fan of small talk. She likes to recharge in another room. So all of that it's quite out of ordinary. So she does come across as weird or strange or even mysterious or unknown to a lot of people, and it's sort of rubbed the wrong way with other people, particularly with women who are all for gossips and for chatting and of causing drama as well, because there's kind of not a lot to do when it comes to for women's life as well. For women's life is all about marriage and giving babies and starting a family and being a mother and being a wife. That's the life that is expected for a woman, and also being entertaining guests and chatting with people and being happy and being folly, and that. But that doesn't come across from Helen, and people find her a bit odd. Then there's a rumor going around about Helen that causes people to avoid her immensely, thinking, oh no, we shouldn't be associated with a woman like that. And that is that she is not a widow. Her husband is still alive, and that she had chose to leave him. And that it does not bode well with everyone, because everyone believes, especially the church around that area, which is heartbreaking for Helen because she is very religious. Having the vicar come over to her house to say, no, you're not allowed at the church because you didn't do what you're supposed to do as a wife by staying there as a wife, and you chose to leave your husband. So yeah, everyone kind of denounced her for that. And back then there was no ideologies of separation. There was no divorce. Once you're married, you're married. That is it. But Gilbert did not believe in these rumors, did not want to entertain the rumors. He thinks that they're all false, particularly from Eliza, who he's starting to see the true colors of. At first he thought of her as delightful and pretty and welcoming, but it turns out that she was actually kind of malicious. And the more you read about Eliza throughout this book, the more that you will see the word malicious describing her, having a malicious smile, malicious glint in her eye, and things like that. So yeah, you're starting to see her true colors a bit through the book. But Gilbert does not like that at all, because he's absolutely infatuated with Helen. He likes visiting her, he likes playing with her son, little Arthur, and loves talking to her. He finds her to be enchanting. He was enchanted by her. He wants to be with her. He wants to marry her. And then when he went to visit her again, he saw her with another man, and all hell breaks loose. So like he's everything is crashing down around him, essentially, not just with another guy, but with his one of his friends. And then when Gilbert finally decided to go visit her, or she begged him to come and visit her, I can't remember which, but either way, they went to see each other. It was quite bitter, to be honest, at the meeting, and Helen decided to entrust him with the diary, hope to explain everything about the situation with the rumors and everything, and would prefer it that he would hear everything from her rather than from other people. And the diary literally explained everything about her past that involves with her husband, how she met him, how she fell in love with him, all the emotions that she's feeling for him, how their marriage, how her aunt is just absolutely against her marrying the said husband, whose name is Arthur Huntington, by the way. And by the time that they were married, their marriage is like slowly crumbling to the point where he was very abusive, particularly emotionally and verbally abusive, to the point where oh god, this is quite sickening to say, where he gets a kick out of seeing her being jealous. So he has no problem flirting with women in front of her, seeing her get angry, and calling her a fool for getting angry because there's nothing going on. So getting a kick out of her for being sad, it's just awful. It is freaking awful. And when she decided to not show any emotions and having no care in the world, he just he thinks he's getting away with everything and just, does what he wants to do. He constantly goes out to London and stays there for like, I don't know, about 4 months. So drinking away, he was cheating. He was cheating on her as well. He was insulting her a lot, and the more you get into her diary, the insults get a lot worse. He was making sure that she this is the bad one. He was making sure that she does not have that he would be the one to take care of Arthur and not her, because he wants to encourage Arthur, the little boy, into having same thoughts that he has, hating his mother, because during that marriage, he was the husband was really hating Helen, and then would use Arthur against her by making sure that she would have little to no time with him, and that he would be the one to influence the little boy into, hating his own mother. That's like the top of the cake right there, the top of the iceberg. It's like, yeah, the guy is scum. And around the time she decided to, you know what, enough's enough. Like, he could abuse me all at once, but doing this with the child and taking him away from me, no, that's out of the question. So she took Arthur, the little Arthur, and as well as her companion Rachel. I think she's her maid, her trusted companion at least, and went out before dawn breaks and left to go to Wildfell Hall. Wildfell Hall was her old parents' place, if I remember. And it turns out the guy that Gilbert was seeing her with, who Gilbert saw her with, turns out to be her brother. So it's perfectly fine. So that's pretty much the story of the Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Now, remember back in the Pumpkin Spice Cafe where I said for a cozy book, there is not a lot of description going around about, the town itself and about the weather, because if it's like an autumn feel, I was expecting, the descriptions of autumn itself, because that is sort of the cozy feeling. And there's just not much description. There's not much of talking about Logan and his past lover. Well, this one has the opposite problem. It's too descriptive, I would say. So I have no problem with it being descriptive at all. In fact, I was very much enjoying it. Apart from at the beginning, where it's quite a shock and it's quite hard to really soak in what is said about, the environment around, not just the environment around, but it also took time to actually explain each characters as well. And then at that point, I just end up forgetting, because it just ends up being so much. But then it ends up being amazing once you hit most of the chapters of Helen's diary and about her past, because it really shows. It's really telling you about her emotions. It's really describing Arthur Huntington's features and how he was angry at her. The other characters as well. She has a lot to say about the description of other characters, particularly on Arthur Huntington's friends, as well as what she's thinking of, what she's feeling at that moment. I really love that in that aspect, so definitely. But it comes a bit too much, where you try to focus on one thing, on one plot of the story, but then it goes off to describing something else. So that was a lot to get my head around, definitely. But I do welcome it. I think tone it down a little bit, but on everything else, I do very much enjoy it, particularly on Helen's past marriage, because it really makes a impact on what Helen is going through, definitely. Gilbert also goes down that similar route of him explaining his emotions when he sees Helen, because don't forget, he was absolutely infatuated with her. Absolutely. Actually, weirdly enough, during the Helen's diary segment, there was you get a little bit of point of view through Arthur Huntington, her husband, and which was a little bit on the confusing side, because he also has an alcohol about, I don't know, it was a little bit weird. I think I can live without knowing Arthur Huntington's thoughts, but Helen's thoughts I do generally love hearing. I do generally love hearing, which is quite interesting because I don't know why it was getting heavily criticized, because I would assume with the Bronte sisters of books, they are known for having women points of views, and not just the Bronte sisters. I think Jane Austen does a bit of that too. So you do get a segment of Helen having her own point of view, her own thoughts. And I think that is quite important, particularly around that time. And particularly when going through a situation where it is out of ordinary around that time as well, where she did choose to leave her husband, even if it goes against her religion, because she's a heavy Christian. Oh, that's another thing Arthur Huntington does, make fun of her faith. Look, if you agree or disagree with the faith, that is perfectly fine, as long as you don't mock people for their faith, which is what Arthur Huntington does against his wife. So yeah, I did very much enjoy this. I was heavily surprised, and not right now because I'm still soaking in a lot of information from this book. But I would like to read more Bronte books in the future. I think I've got Wuthering Heights somewhere in my parents' room. And I think my dad has Jane Eyre as well, so I would like to read them. But yeah, I do generally like this. There's a lot of drama. Definitely a lot of drama, definitely. It really gives a lot of female voice as well. Particularly when it involves like a female trying to get out of an abusive relationship. And she wasn't the only one and Helen wasn't the only one that was going through a abusive relationship. I think one of her friends was also going through an abusive marriage as well, but that ended quite differently. What happened there is that she told her friend's husband, "You are scum and you should change," and he slowly changed for the better, and now her friend is happy. So there are two sides to how that could go, leaving or try to change his ways. But don't forget, around this time there was no such thing as divorce, and separation was out of the question. Maybe that's why it was heavily criticized, because you wouldn't think that would do when it comes to trying to get married. But I did very much enjoy that, and it did make me research a little bit behind this book, understanding the Bronte sisters a bit more, particularly that they are female novelists around that time, which I can imagine is very difficult. And I don't know much about Anne Bronte. As I said, this is the first I've heard of her. I knew that there were 3 Bronte sisters. I just only knew 2. I didn't even know the last one. And the fact that Charlotte had to suppress this book to protect her sister from criticism is quite interesting. But I wish to know more adaptations of this, because I think this is quite an important read, particularly if you want to understand the female aspects during that time. I think this is definitely a good read, and I think people should definitely be well aware of it, just as much as people are aware of Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. But yeah, that's all I got to say about the book. Thank you ever so much for joining me in my book review. I'm sorry it took a while. It did took longer than I thought, definitely. And reading the book was reading the book was a journey in itself, because as I say, it's a writing style that I'm quite unfamiliar with. The language is a very old-timey, to the point where I had to have time and breathing space to try and get into and to try and understand. So it was a lot. But I do welcome the over description of this book, and how describes the environment around and the people, because I feel like all of that descriptions does make the drama much more impactful, which is something that the Pumpkin Spice Cafe really lack. Now, I know they're two completely different books. One is very, very modern, and I believe is based around like cozy simulation games because it has that element, while the other is much more on the political side to show the female point of view of being in a married life and trying to live throughout that time. So very, very different, but we shouldn't neglect for the fact that describing environments and describing characters within the drama does make things much more impactful. And I was impacted particularly of what Helen went through, definitely, and how people deem her as the odd one, essentially, because she is an introverted, highly intelligent woman that decided to leave her husband for her son's sake. So yeah, that is my opinion. For that, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I was going to say 3.5 because the over description is a bit much, but I feel like if I had more time to really let the words soak in and what happened, then yeah, it would be, I would say around 3.5 to 4 out of 5 stars. So yeah, thank you ever so much for joining me in my book review. I do hope you very much enjoy it. The next book I am going to be reading, and I am very, 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 very late into the game of this. I'm going to read A Court of Thorns and Roses. You can see the bookmark. I'm ready to start reading it. Which I'm very much late into the game. I've heard many great things about it, and yes, I am a sucker for enemies to lovers. This is one of the most popular reads if you're much interested in enemies to lovers, so I am looking forward to this one. And if I love this, I'll definitely fish out or definitely find at least some more books within the series of Court of Thorns and Roses. But yeah, thank you ever so much. Do take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully to see you soon. Do take care. Bye bye.